October the 4th is a special day for me, not just because it's 10/4, aka Trucker Day. It's also the anniversary of the launch of my novel, Sleepless Hollow, which ties in seamlessly with the narrative from The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. This is hands down my favorite story by Washington Irving, and I've read several others by him. This was originally published in 1819/1820. Once was as a standalone, the other date was when it was published as a collection. So in order to tie this in with the 200th anniversary of the book in 2020, I published this in 2019, but set it in 2020. So today, the book is 5 years old. I wanted to talk about the timeline of these two, how they connect, why I chose to write the story the way that I did, and why this is still one of my favorite books that I've written. So let's take a look at the board here, and we'll analyze just how this whole thing plays out. Here's the timeline. I will distinguish between what Irving wrote and what I wrote. Don't worry, it all breaks down pretty simply. So, 1776 on the far left side there, that was when the Headless Horseman was created. He was a Hessian rider who got his head blown off by a cannonball in an unnamed battle in the Revolutionary War, and ever since then, his specter has been haunting the countryside looking for his head. 1790 is when the original legend takes place. Ichabod Crane is a Connecticut schoolmaster who comes to Sleepy Hollow. This is important because he's a Yankee, he's English, we'll say, and the town of Sleepy Hollow is Dutch. They consider him an outsider. He's goofy looking. He's not that attractive. He's not that, he's smart. He's also very, very superstitious. He doesn't have a lot of swagger going for him. He falls in love with a local girl named Katrina, but he has to contend with the local Chad named Brom Bones in order to win her heart. Brom Bones uses superstition and trickery, playing on the legend of the Headless Horseman, to terrify Ichabod Crane and get him to leave town so that he can marry Katrina. And then 1820 is significant because, for sake of ease, I'm not going to specify the dual year thing. We'll just say that that's when Washington Irving published The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. This is all in the real world timeline. Now we show up in 2020, and in the modern day, Josie is a 22-year-old woman who lives in Sleepy Hollow, and she's familiar with the legend and everything. She can see ghosts. It causes her nothing but trouble, but she does eventually decide that she's going to monetize this thing. She's going to start a YouTube channel where she does ghost hunting, but there are reasons why she really shouldn't do this. It's going to cause her a lot of problems. That's where we introduce the male lead of the story, Silas Proctor, who is a ghost, but he stays hidden from Josie because he doesn't want to get pulled into that world. There are reasons why not. And he intentionally sabotages her channel and stuff to keep her from getting on the radar of a secret government entity that tracks that sort of thing. Now, Josie and Silas do eventually team up, along with this lady here on the right side of the cover. That's Kay. She's a freelance ghost hunter. She's able to kind of break things down for Josie and explain it all to her. But at the same time, on the 200th anniversary of the publication of the legend, the ghost of Ichabod Crane wants to come back. His reasons as yet are not clear, but he plans to rewrite history. So in 2020, the ghost of Ichabod Crane comes back to Sleepy Hollow. He's got a time machine. He's also got a resurrection machine. He's able to make himself mortal again. And for reasons that are stated in the story, he decides to do it on this day. He needs to do it on this day. And he's able to build a machine that will open a hole in time and let him go back to 1790 to change history. He doesn't like the legend of Sleepy Hollow. He doesn't like how it mocks his failure. He wants to get the girl. This is how he's going to do it. Now, at this point in the story, Josie has some awareness of what's going on. She's been walking around with Silas and Kay for a couple of hours, and they explain the lay of it all to her. She understands that time can't be messed with. And so in the heat of battle, she ends up falling through the portal with Crane and goes back to 1790. That's what this red line is here. Red is Josie, green is Silas. She falls back into 1790. This immediately creates an alternate timeline going forward out of 2020 where Josie no longer exists and Silas and Kay have to figure out a way to fix history. They take the next 62 years, hence 2082 there on the side, to recreate Crane's process. There's a lot of trial and error here, and if you've seen a short story that I wrote called Sic Semper Tyrannosaurus, it happens in that alternate timeline of the future. Finally, in 2082, a very old resurrected Silas is able to get the machine up and running, and he goes all the way back to 1790 to rescue Josie at the exact moment that she and the resurrected Crane appeared in New York. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky because Silas's connection to Josie is that he actually was the soldier who killed the horseman in 1776. And right before he died, he witnessed what he thought was an angel telling him that it was going to be okay. He didn't realize that it was actually a woman from the future. And then when 2010 rolled around and Josie's family moved to Sleepy Hollow and he saw this little red-haired girl, he realized this was the angel that he saw all the way back in the 1770s. He doesn't understand why. And so he's become kind of fixated on her, but hasn't made himself known to her because he's trying to keep her off of spectral enforcement's radar. But when the time comes in 1790 to grab the resurrected Crane, grab Josie, and return them to 2020, there's a glitch with the machine and they all jump back to 1776. So now, right here, the old alternate future Silas and Josie are there on the sidelines watching the original Silas kill the original horseman. And now Silas gets an answer to a question that has plagued him for over 200 years. He recalibrates the machine, and he and Josie and this resurrected Crane return all the way to 2020, mere seconds after the original jump. But for them, they both lived very, very long lives. In fact, there's now a clipped timeline where Josie dropped into 1790, ended up living the next 20 years or so, and then died out of the way of history. But all that was corrected the moment that old man Silas returned to 1790 to pick her up. So as you can see, it can get a little bit convoluted, and ultimately, new timelines were created and clipped throughout this story. I get to play with that a little bit in other Silas Proctor adventures, including the Guild of Eldritch Adventurers, if you have read that one. I am going to put it together in a print version at some point in the future, but for now, if you want to read another story, you can read Sic Semper Tyrannosaurus just to get a taste of the process that Crane underwent, figuring out how to jump all the way back to 1790 and save Josie. This is a fun time travel romp, and hopefully I got it all right. Time travel is one of those things that can be tricky to write, and even if you think you've got it all laid out and figured out, some reader who's dialed into it a different way from you will analyze it and say, but you caused this problem, or what about this now? I like to think that I got all those I's dotted and T's crossed, but we shall see. In the same way that Silas establishes that you're not supposed to mess with mortality and resurrect people the way that Ichabod Crane does, you're also not supposed to mess with time. But as long as there's somebody who's aware of the error in time and actively engaged in fixing it, you won't invoke biblical powers coming down and eradicating an alternate timeline. That's something that's all clarified in the story. Right now, you can get a copy of Sleepless Hollow in paperback for less than $10. I think it's less than $5 on the Kindle. And it's fully illustrated. I've got a couple of pieces in here that hopefully have printed well. That's one of the downsides of the Amazon KDP thing, is I can spend all this time illustrating something really, really in sharp detail, like these pieces here. And the printing can only capture so much of it. Like, see how dark and detailed and crisp that is? Josie and another ghost named Kirsten while she's doing some treasure hunting. It gets a little bit washed out there, but I think the point still comes across. This was a ton of fun to write, and I really, really love Washington Irving's writing. Obviously, no piece of his has stood the test of time more heartily than The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, and I wanted to find a way to connect to that and write a long sequel to it with my own characters that still respected what he did, didn't change what he did, and really, in fact, emphasized what he did. I may even, at some point in the future, release a hardcover omnibus that has The Legend of Sleepy Hollow in it with illustrations of mine. I don't know. We'll see. I fear that if I do that, I don't want to dilute the people who have actually purchased books of this or copies of this book before. But anyway, those are just thoughts that I have in idle moments when I pretend to have more time than I do. Definitely check out Sleepless Hollow. Again, this is one of my favorite books that I've written, and I'm really proud of how it came out, and it's obviously perfect for this time of year because it all takes place on Halloween night in 2020. Drive safe. See you out there.